Hey everyone, hopefully you guys are enjoying Monster Hunter in whichever fashion you're choosing to play it as. And as we continue to wait for the full-on reveal of Monster Hunter 6, speculation and rumors are running amok. Today I wanted to do a little bit of a catch-all regarding all of the rumors that we have seen, kind of shared around on social media, pseudo insiders and things of that nature regarding what we could potentially see for the next mainline Monster Hunter game, as Capcom has officially not revealed anything as of right now, and the 20th anniversary page has been recently updated with some more information. So I thought it was a pretty good time as we get closer to the Game Awards, where people are hoping for something to happen there, to have a little bit of a recap of all the rumors and information that we have seen kind of passed around. I'm going to be leaving a link in the description below for the rpgcodex.net post that I kind of saw, kind of like summarized this relatively well, post by a user named Perkle. I don't think they claim to be an insider by any means or anything along those lines. They don't seem to have any insider information, but they're pretty much recapping everything, and this kind of inspired me to make this video and kind of go over all of the rumors and pseudo leaks that we seemingly have available to us right now. Again, no confirmation of anything, take everything with a grain of salt, yada yada yada, you know what to expect. First and foremost, they mentioned that the release dates and platforms, they claim it to be pretty solid rumors, but ultimately, again, that's up to everyone's interpretation at the end of the day. They mentioned that a trailer and announcement will happen at the Game Awards on, of course, December 7th, with a PR campaign starting heavily in the middle of December. Now, I've let my opinions known regarding what's probably going to happen at the Game Awards or what's probably not going to happen at the Game Awards, so we're going to leave that as is. I think they're going to talk about Capcom, I should say, is going to talk about Dragon's Dogma 2. That is their next mainline game that they're going to focus on, and Monster Hunter will simply have to wait. That is my opinion, though, but of course, everyone is free to have their own. But if they do end up showing at the very least a logo at the Game Awards, I think that will be more than enough at the very least for me personally, but I understand more other people will probably want to see a little bit more. And the next rumor that they claim here is that a simultaneous worldwide release for both PC and consoles, unlike before, mostly due to World being a 5th generation game selling the most on PC. Now, a PC release isn't necessarily out of the question specifically for launch. Obviously, we've seen plenty of rumors and Capcom's very own internal details regarding them focusing more on PC games going into the future. There was maybe even 2 years back, around the time that we were still very early on into Rise, where they were still talking about just focusing more on PC games in general, Capcom as a company, that is. So this doesn't necessarily surprise me in the least. That could potentially happen and launch day one on PC, regardless of what console it launches on. In their next line, they mentioned that Capcom in their latest investor call said that they will release a major unannounced game in March of 2024. Again, seemingly going back to the first line, I think that's Dragon's Dogma 2. We already have that information. There is some suggestions at the very least that it might have been a mistranslation when they said unannounced game. It was actually an unrevealed game or something along those lines. Playing words, games aside, and translations aside, I think ultimately we are going to see Dragon's Dogma 2, but that remains to be seen. They also mentioned that Capcom leak from 2020 leaked both Monster Hunter Rise and Monster Hunter 6th generation before they were officially announced, and so far every single unannounced game. That is accurate. The Capcom major leak not only provided us pretty much the roadmap of early and base Monster Hunter Rise with the introduction of Sunbreak later on, but also plenty of more details. It kind of reminds me a little bit closer to what we have recently seen with the Xbox leaks that we got, where like pretty much Xbox's all reveals and pretty much all major games and even platforms pretty much heading into like 2029 were fully leaked out of nowhere. So Capcom already went through that, you know. Xbox, Microsoft just recently went through that as well. Nintendo did many years back. So seemingly this happens out of nowhere, and for a period of time pretty much those leaks end up being 100% accurate. In the next line, they mentioned that Monster Hunter 6 will launch on PC, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xboxes as in Xbox One and Xbox Series S and X, and Nintendo Switch and iPhones. Now, here's the thing that I find interesting about this one. Of course, PC, we already talked about that. That's kind of a given. PlayStation 5, of course, that's a given. Xbox Series S and X, I can see that for sure, absolutely. iPhones, maybe even the new iPhone Pro 16, 15, whatever the new number that they're on. Capcom has been releasing, I believe, the new Resident Evils are coming to like the latest iPhones. A lot of people are like making a lot of hype regarding that. Those are like fully fledged actual games on iPhones now running properly. So I can actually see them trying to do that. But when it comes to the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and the Nintendo Switch, I'm a bit more skeptical. Now, let's be mindful here. PlayStation 4 still has whatever it is, 110 million, 120 million units out there somewhere. Xbox One still has whatever 40, 50 million units out there. And of course, the Nintendo Switch has 130 plus whatever million units out there. So it makes sense monetarily as a company to be able to get to those audiences and be able to cash in on that. But ultimately, will the game suffer, visually, gameplay wise, frame rates wise, performance wise? That's really what we are, what we should be able to expect. But cross-platform games have been happening since pretty much the launch of the PlayStation 5 now. 3 years ago. The PS5 is 3 years old, and we're still seeing plenty of PS4 games released. So that's not going to slow down anytime soon. In the next line, they mentioned that there will be 2 versions with the same mechanics but different graphics. So I'm guessing they're alluding to what I just said regarding top version, the top visual version, PS5, Series X, maybe even Series S and PC, and then everything else, PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and iPhones, pretty much having the lesser version of the games, which is not that much of a surprise. And the next line, they confirmed that PC, PlayStation 5, and Series X will get the high-end version, with PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, and iPhones getting the lower-end versions. The Switch sets the bar for PlayStation 4 and iPhone. Now, this one is probably going to be a little surprising to some people, because if you're not paying attention to Nintendo Switch news, it's probably something you're not really too aware of. But the Nintendo Switch has been kind of like the tailored game for a lot of recent games that are multi-platform. I believe the Sonic Superstars, I believe it was. That Sonic game was actually designed for the Nintendo Switch and upscaled to every other console. So like the base version of that game being designed by the developers is the Nintendo Switch. Everything else gets upscaled if it goes PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, whatever, PC. And obviously those versions of the game run better, but the game is designed with the Nintendo Switch in mind. Remember, Rise was designed for the Nintendo Switch and eventually upscaled to PC, and that version of the PC version brought over to PlayStation and Xbox. So this isn't that much of a long shot. It's just contextualizing what we kind of already should be expecting. But again, I'm still skeptical. They mentioned that it will run on the RE engine, which is heavily modified, or the REX engine, which is heavily modified from the RE engine to make next gen looking games. Now, this I'm very skeptical of, because there's no suggestion as of right now of an REX engine. We haven't heard Capcom mention that they're going to be working on a new engine or anything like that, or at the very least a better version of the RE engine already. If in fact, I kind of made a video talking about how Exo Primal looked fantastic, especially with that upcoming Monster Hunter DLC, and if that's actually what Monster Hunter 6 is going to look like based on what we're seeing on Exo Primal, I think we're due for something really great, because it doesn't look like Monster Hunter World at all, what we're seeing with those assets in Exo Primal, but they look fantastic at the end of the day, and all of that is running on the RE engine on a PlayStation 5, so that looks pretty great to me. So I'm interested to see what did they actually suggest here by some sort of REX or upgraded version of the RE engine. They also mentioned that there are rumors that there won't be a G rank or a master version anymore. It will be now tied to an overarching story with live service. Now that doesn't sound good for all traditional Monster Hunter fans at all. However, live service games are pretty much the norm nowadays, and in no different than open world games, it doesn't surprise me if Capcom were to revamp the franchise. This is the way that they would choose to go about it. So this is not something I personally want to hear, but at the end of the day, man, all these developers and publishers are chasing live service money. They saw what Fortnite did, and everyone wants Fortnite money, and I can't necessarily fault them for that, but the user end experience with, you know, loot boxes and live service games and season passes and you know, all those things are just not fun, and the grind is forevermore, and Monster Hunter now is proof of that already. They also mentioned that game is designed as a complete live service game, and it will be updated with much more than it used to in World or Rise. Again, none of that sounds exciting to me, but it wouldn't surprise me. I've been very skeptical of the future of gaming because of these type of things, and I think I've already said my piece regarding that already. They also mentioned that heavy microtransactions and store shenanigans. Almost nothing gameplays wise, but a ton of cosmetics, wings, and other garbage like decorations and player rooms. Well, if Monster Hunter World, Iceborne, Rise, and certainly Sunbreak were anything to go by, we already know that microtransactions play a massive role in Monster Hunter. They're gonna sell you the skins of the actual characters that you already have in the game. They're gonna sell you the voice packs. They're gonna sell you stickers. They're gonna sell you palico skins. They're gonna sell you everything that they can, as long as they don't necessarily make weapons more powerful or better drop rates or anything along those lines. A lot of players seem to be fine with that, but microtransactions are already part of Monster Hunter. This isn't that much of a surprise, and I kind of expect it to get worse going forward. They also mentioned that Capcom heavily invested into this game, a huge headcount, huge sales predictions for almost 15 million over lifetime. Now that seems ridiculous to me. 15 million copies sold worldwide for this game, when we know that both World and Iceborne, which I believe is at the top of the franchise at this point, sold what, 20 something, 30 something top united together. I don't necessarily see 50 million being something, especially when you're trying to do live service with microtransactions. I just don't see it. That's a crazy number to try to reach, and it seems a little bit unrealistic. Lastly, they mentioned that unlike other Monster Hunter games, this is a 4-year project and there will be no portable version like Monster Hunter Rise was. Essentially what that means is that it's being created by the first team, so that's not much of a surprise there. We kind of already expected that, since the second developer team already worked on Rise and Sunbreak, and they're gonna need some time to, at the very least, adjust to whatever the next game that they're gonna work on, or at the very least support whatever this next mainline Monster Hunter game will be. When it comes to gameplay and content, and they also prefix this by saying less solid rumors, they mentioned that the 6 generations when it comes to combat and mechanics will be more of a progression rather than a big shakeup like World was. But my question to that would be, a progression towards what? Rise or World? So it's essentially, is it a continuation of World? Well, we know we have Ryosu Sugimoto literally saying that Monster Hunter World will not be the base on what they're going to build upon going into the future. I know originally, I want to say maybe 6 years ago or so, before World launched, we had a quote that suggested that World might be the base for the next 10 years. But as of recently, Ryosu Sugimoto spoke and said World is not the base on what they're going to plan on going forward, and if we know that they're going to do live service, open world, whatever, then World cannot be the base. So gameplay wise, will they go more Rise, more Sunbreak, or just transition back into World? I'd be interested to know what they're going to try to do there. They also mentioned that heavy rumors that it will have an actual open world, not just open areas. This is the biggest thing that I've been dreading even more than live service, is the fact that they go open world and they just completely re-emphasize the game into something that it isn't. I'm not a big fan of that. But if the previous sort of quote rumored suggests that it's not a big shakeup, but then they're also going to make it into a live service open world game, that kind of contradicts and kind of opposes what they just said. So I'm not necessarily sure what to make there. But again, these are just speculations and rumors. They also mentioned that content wise, it will be the biggest Monster Hunter game for a new generation. Largest base was Monster Hunter 4 with 50 monster, and World had half of that. Remember, one of the biggest criticisms that we saw for World originally was that it didn't have a lot of monsters originally, and Iceborne kind of adjusted that. Rise had a better onslaught for monsters, but then Sunbreak kind of like opened up the floodgates. So hopefully they learn from those two mistakes, and they do indeed introduce more monsters right out of the gate. They also mentioned that a 16th weapon introduction, but much like Try, it won't have a full tree. So new weapons, that's kind of like a given, I want to say. That is something that we can expect. Even if they just bring Tomfus over from Frontiers onto the mainline game, that will be more than enough for a lot of people. But a brand new actual weapon that we haven't seen before is something that a lot of players will be very excited to see. All of the weapons will get moveset refreshes, and 2 weapons will apparently get major rework. Now, it wouldn't surprise me if we're talking about the lances here, both lance and gun lance, although gun lance does get a lot of love already as is, but lances need the love for sure. And I think probably Insiglaive at this point in time needs a major rework because it just doesn't work the way that it was supposed to any longer. But new refreshes for weapons, that's kind of always a given, so that doesn't really surprise me in the least. They mentioned that dogs, aka Palamutes, will now make a comeback from the mainline Rise. That doesn't surprise me either. Ultimately, I'm kind of okay with that. Palicos are pretty much the staple. The cats are always going to be there. Palamutes probably should be able to just become mounts at the end of the day. They were a little bit too powerful in Rise and Sunbreak at the end of the day, so it doesn't surprise me. But Traversal, because you're probably going to have open world and you're going to have mounts, you don't necessarily need a Palamute on top of that. So I can see the redundancy there. They also mentioned that NPCs can join you in offline hunts and will be featured again in major way. Developers apparently love that. So they are suggesting basically what we ended up seeing in Rise and Sunbreak, where you have followers, pretty much the followers, when you bring in, the characters from the actual stories into the game and you are able to hunt with them. That basically makes it so players who don't want to necessarily play online or want to do things offline, they can bring support characters over to heal them, to support them, to do buffs, to tank, to do extra damage, whatever the case is. I have no real issues with that, and I think that was a great addition. Followers for Rise and Sunbreak were fantastic, and I love that idea going forward, so they should just keep that. They also mentioned that the main story is focused on partly a newbie hunter, including you, that will hunt with you on the main quest, and you will be able to take them on side quests. So essentially, the protagonist or another character will be one of the side quest buddy or one of the followers that you bring along. That doesn't surprise me in the least, and that actually does make sense if you're gonna bring characters from the story along with you, and then another character that's kind of like coming alongside you, kind of like your rival in Pokemon, if you want to look at it that way. But they instead of being your rival, they kind of come along with you. That kind of makes a lot of sense, and I have no issues with that whatsoever. They mentioned that Endgame will have some sort of overarching story as a live service game that will progress with new monsters introduced and updates that will culminate in some event that will introduce Master and G rank modes, upon which base the endgame and will be removed, and the endgame will only be Master rank and G rank mode. That's very wordy to basically say the live service will only have normal hard mode introduced originally, and then once you get to endgame, harder difficulties like Master rank or quote-unquote G rank will be introduced post-launch. That makes sense, except the whole live service part, which I've already said my piece on. They also mentioned that underwater combat makes a comeback, but it won't be the focus of the game. Effectively a supportive role for monsters that used to live like Laga or Lagiacris, Ludok, and Plesioth, and it will be featured only on one part of a map. So I don't know, man. That development time when it comes to like underwater combat, I know we have the quotes from the developers already when they were talking about working on that, or like reminiscent of the time, and they mentioned that development for underwater combat was a lot of work, and it ultimately they didn't feel like it lived up to expectations. I know a lot of players want underwater combat. It makes sense if it's an open world game in that regard, but I just don't particularly see it. But if they do have an open world, one part of the map is underwater, I guess that does make sense at the end of the day. In the last few things, they mentioned that portable features like better cat management will have a base version but not crazy movesets, and speed known for Rise and Generations. So basically, they're going back to World is what that says to me, because if you don't have the speed or the kineticness that your character had in the same way that had World and Sunbreak, or Rise and Sunbreak rather, then it doesn't necessarily seem to me like it's going to be a fast game, and it goes back to just the slower, not clunkier, but definitely slower, more methodical approach that World has, which to some players it was fine, but a lot of players, I've seen the memes, and I'm sure you guys have seen as well. Rise and Sunbreak were fast, and when people go back and play World and Iceborne, they just say those games feel slow, and everyone knows that. It's just kind of like unanimous at this point. So I'm not really sure what to make of that decision if it does end up being true. And lastly, they mentioned that there will be some sort of assist mode, easy mode for phones, due to the problems with input. And I think if you take a closer look at what we have seen regarding like the Resident Evils that are making their way onto like iPhones, that's kind of already there. Easier, simpler controls, touch doesn't always work on all games, and you're not gonna like rebuild the game up just to make it seem more like Monster Hunter now. Although it does make me wonder how this game will stack up if it does come to specifically iPhones. How would they stack it up versus Monster Hunter now? Like, how would they even try to get players to play both games together? That would be really weird and interesting to see how they juxtapose both games ultimately at the end of the day. But that's pretty much all of these speculation rumors that we have seen. Huge shout out to Perko and the RPGcoders.net forums, where they kind of posted this. Someone sent me a link. I thought I should kind of talk about it, since there's a lot of really interesting things, some things that we already kind of talked about before. But at the end of the day, it was a little bit of a refresher to me to kind of go over all of this, give my opinion, and I certainly want to hear your guys' feedback on this as to which one of these makes sense, which one of these do not. Certainly do let me know in the comments. If you're brand new to my channel though, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up, and as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.